I'm a stay-at-home mom of 4 kids, and they are out of the house, so let's do this. Life is busy. Today, I'm going to tell you the story about how finding God totally changed the way that I give birth and who I am as a mother. I'm going to share a little bit about my first 3 birth experiences, and finally, I'm going to share 3 things that you can believe in so that you can have the natural birth of your dreams too. So a little bit about me. You don't know me. It's my first video. Okay. I was not raised in a Christian household. I didn't grow up talking about God. Even saying Jesus out loud just kind of still feels weird. I totally believed in various new ageisms like enlightenment and the collective consciousness and karma and astrology and chakras and yoga and all these different things. Those are my nachos. 1 second. When the kids are gone, we snack, am I right? Okay. Anyway, growing up, I was totally into like ghosts and the paranormal and aliens and all that stuff. And I thought it was totally cool and normal. It wasn't until I was an adult with 3 kids that I officially, for lack of a better phrase, came to Christ. I was baptized actually last year. So like I said, I'm still very new to this and it's kind of awkward talking about it for me still, but we're going to get there. So just to recap a little bit about my first 3 births, I'm going to go really fast because my birth stories are very long. My labors in the past have lasted 40 hours or more for each. Well, for the first 2, they were 40 hours, 48 hours, 24-hour home birth. And then the last one is I don't want to say magic. The last one was the miracle birth that really, well, we'll get there. It was awesome. I'll tell you about it. When I got pregnant the first time, it was a surprise, but we were excited about it. Of course, when you first see that test, you're hit with that rush of emotion, especially if you weren't planning for a baby. But we were ready. Anyway, we were excited. I was pre-med in college, so I knew a lot about anatomy and physiology, but I didn't know what to expect when it came to birth, and I had never thought about it. So I started looking for prenatal care providers. I had my first appointment or 2 at just the normal doctor's office, and that felt really clinical and impersonal to me. I knew intrinsically that birth wasn't a medical emergency, and I wanted this to be a more personal experience, so we decided to go with the birth center. The birth center is staffed by midwives, and it was a lovely place. The appointments were about an hour long each. We really got to know the midwives, and I mean, the rooms had jacuzzi tubs. Like it was going to be great, right? And it was like they did their job, and it was a beautiful experience, but it didn't really set me up for success in the way that I needed. In hindsight, I was really trusting the midwives like 100% to get me through the experience. Like I'd read books, I'd made a birth plan, I'd studied a lot about, what was going to happen, but nothing really prepares you, or at least I thought, better than the experience of being there for, hundreds of births before me. They've seen it all, so I'm going to trust them to get me through it, right? So for my first birth, my waters broke before labor started. My waters actually, in hindsight, I know what happened now. My waters were slowly opening over the course of a couple days. But once I went into the birth center and they confirmed that my waters were broken, I wasn't allowed to leave. And so I labored there for about 24 hours before, things didn't really get going. My contractions weren't really starting. And after 24 hours, due to their licensing regulations, I ended up getting transferred to the hospital. Important thing to note, I wasn't transferred for anything medically that was going wrong. It was because of their licensing restrictions. Once I was transferred to the hospital, I was induced with Pitocin, and that started a whole cascade of interventions that I'm not even going to go into here, but let's just cut to the chase and say it wasn't what I wanted. And I did have to negotiate my way out of a C-section several different times. Baby was born vaginally. Baby was healthy. I was healthy. That's all that matters, right? No, it's not all that matters. I hate it when people say that, because it encourages you to just stop your story there. Your story doesn't stop there, okay? I wrote it off. I said, okay, end of story. And I wrote it off as a fluke experience. My body was new to this, right? Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe something happened that caused my water to break early that I should do different next time. Whatever. Healthy baby. Let's try again next time. Okay. Recenter. Snack. For my second birth, things went much the same way, except this time my waters broke in a huge gush and my contractions started right away. So immediately I'm thinking, this is going to be better. This is going to be different this time. I'm so excited. Good things to think, right? We waited for a bit before going into the birth center. We did all the things that you're supposed to do to avoid jumping the gun in early labor. Once we got into the birth center, we labored there. I labored there for, well, I'm not going to say that my husband didn't labor. We were there for a freaking long time. I labored there for over 24 hours. It was a long, I remember them looking at their clock and saying, well, you've been here for over 24 hours, but you're obviously in active labor, so let's just keep going. We're not outside of our restrictions because you're in labor. When I finally got the urge to push, I was exhausted. I had been at this for over a day straight. The midwives checked me and I was told that I was not fully dilated and baby was still too high and that I should avoid pushing so that I don't hurt myself. If you've never had a baby before, I cannot underestimate the urgency that comes with the urge to push. Your body is putting everything into it and there's no stopping it. Trying to stop it is like trying to stop a freight train with your mind. It's almost impossible. I've heard women compare the urge to push with the urge to vomit. Like, try to imagine heaving and willing yourself not to vomit. You get the point. Anyway, at this point I was so exhausted. I didn't know if I could keep going, you know, with the diagnosis that my baby is too high and I'm not dilated enough. I probably still have hours to go. I gave up. I thought, well, I'm going to be too exhausted. You're going to have to pull the baby out of me. This isn't going to work. Let's just go to the hospital. This is during COVID and our hospital was on high alert. So despite calling ahead and making sure that the room was ready and that there was going to be people waiting to accept me into the hospital so I didn't have to go through all of their, you know, COVID screening processes. And when I got to the hospital, it was bad. We got there and it was bad. Okay. The staff was really belligerent to me and my husband. Someone forcefully held a mask over my face while I was trying to breathe through those don't push contractions. They tried to kick my husband out before I could even lay down in the bed. They withheld treatment until I bent to whatever their will was for me. It was a really traumatic experience involving a lot of coercion and gaslighting, and that's a story for another time. But I labored there for another 8 hours after receiving the epidural, and I felt baby turn after getting a nice hip massage from a nurse, and baby was born. Baby was 10 pounds. So take that, nurse who said that my baby was too big that I couldn't birth vaginally. But there were no issues. So healthy mom, healthy baby, right? No. Immediately after baby was born, the cord was cut and I was marked in their system as a difficult patient. And they told me that. Again, healthy mom, healthy baby, but that's not all that matters. We actually did have another unrelated hospital stay after that. Another story for another time. But that greatly contributed to my hospital trauma, which feeds into my decisions for the next birth. When I got pregnant the third time, I knew that something had to change. This birth center stuff is not working. We're going to try for a home birth this time because obviously I don't want to go back to the hospital where they're going to treat me like a problem patient from the get-go. This time we hired an independent licensed midwife to come to our house for the prenatal visits and then also to be there for the home birth. And you know what? That was a wonderful experience too. My kids loved her. My dog loved her. She was a really nice person and she did her job well. Towards the end of that pregnancy, I actually started learning about Freebirth from a very popular podcast that I'm not going to mention by name. And when I mentioned that to my midwife, she all of a sudden started to get worried about things. I think honestly she was worried about me choosing to free birth instead of having her there at my birth. So maybe subconsciously she was trying to instill that fear in me so that I would then put my trust in her to make sure that she was there. Anyway, there was a little bit of drama that was unnecessarily introduced at the very end of my pregnancy, but comparatively, it was a much better experience. Like I said, my births went from 40 hours and 48 hours to a 24-hour birth. And that was, it was positive, you know what? I learned a lot from that birth. The importance of listening to your body and giving it what it needs when it needs it, like sleep and snacks. And just taking a break when you need to take a break. But it was a good birthing experience, okay? I had my baby at home, right on the couch, right over there. Different couch, but it was right over there. And I got to stay home. I didn't go to the hospital. I didn't have any trauma associated with it, but I was also still left feeling somehow unfulfilled at the end. All right, I just got a call that my kids are coming home, so we got to wrap this up. What I didn't realize at the time that my first 3 births had in common was where I was putting my trust, who I was putting my faith in at the end of the day to get me through the experience. And for my first 2 births, I was putting my trust in the midwives, like I said before. For my 3rd birth, I was putting my trust a little bit in the midwife, but largely in just myself and my husband. But there is so much that you are missing out on when you don't put your faith in God. What I didn't realize was that there are lies that we internalize about ourselves that need to be addressed before you are entering into the birth experience. And you need to address those lies with the truth, the real truth. And yes, I mean the gospel truth. Lies like, yeah, birth is natural, but it's also dangerous. My body is capable, but it cannot be fully trusted. Doctors will save you in the event that anything goes wrong. And believing in these things totally messed me up. For my 3rd birth, I had started the journey of addressing these truths, but I wasn't all the way there yet. And so the experience was a little bit better, but it's, like I said, it still left me somehow unfulfilled. And it was a 24-hour labor, which by other people's metrics is still pretty long. When we put our faith in man-made systems, it leaves us open to fear and anxiety. And that fear and anxiety gets in, and it just creates this self-fulfilling cycle, the self-propelling hamster wheel that leaves us reaching to things that can save us from whatever we're feeling worried about. But those things that we reach for don't ever truly save us. They just perpetuate the cycle. We're not addressing the root causes that cause the fear to begin with. So here's the 3 things that if I had just believed in to begin with, I could have had miracle births for all 4 of my births. Number 1, God's timing is perfect. If I believed this for my first birth, I wouldn't have gotten membrane sweeps. I wouldn't have taken that evening primrose oil. I wouldn't have rushed to the birth center right away. I wouldn't have gotten transferred to the hospital so early. I wouldn't have gotten induced. Baby wouldn't have shown signs of distress from the induction. I wouldn't have ended up with an epidural, etc. With my second, I would have trusted my instincts to rest during my long labor instead of curb walking and stair climbing and doing all of these things to try to get labor to progress more quickly. I would have trusted my instinct to push when my body said it was time. Maybe it was time, and my body would have just figured things out, as baby was born. And with my third, I actually had this taped to my bedroom wall. Point number 2, God made your body to do this. With my first, I would have objected to the induction and avoided the rest of that cascade of interventions. And with my second, I would have hung in there instead of transferring to the hospital to get the epidural. But I was believing what the midwives were telling me about how my body's not ready yet and something could go wrong. So let's panic, because if an emergency happens, we might not be fully prepared to handle all eventualities as midwives. God made your body to do this. And thirdly, if I had believed that God is always with me to guide me, I wouldn't have been leaning on the medical system so hard as a crutch. Sure, it's okay to use it. That's perfectly fine. God can meet you where you're at. He's going to be wherever you are. But if you consciously make the decision to instead put your faith in a man-made system, God's going to respect that decision. and you'll find yourself in total reliance on the very human people around you, which can work. When I believed these 3 things, it totally changed not only the way that I give birth, but my entire life. It changed how I mother. You can do it too. Remember, God's timing is perfect. God made your body to do this, and God is always with you to guide you. I gotta go. I don't want to leave a cliffhanger for you, so I'm gonna record a little bit about my birth story and put it like in with editing somehow. Like I said, this is my first video. But I'm gonna figure it out. So this ain't gonna work. All right, hey guys, it's late. Let's finish this up. Okay, birth story number 4. This time I was gonna do it with God. I tried the birth center. I did the hospital. I tried the home birth, and they all worked. But this time, I wanted my midwife to be Jesus. It sounds so silly saying it out loud, but legitimately, that was my internal mantra. I had scripture printed out, and I had it taped all over my bedroom wall. I had certain verses memorized and ready to go for when labor got hard. But here's the thing. My labor was actually really short. From start to finish, it was, well, after my contractions started, from start to finish, it was 3 hours. So my water broke the day before, and it started breaking in like gushes, so it wasn't like all at once, but it was all throughout the day. Contractions didn't start, but that was pretty normal for me, so I wasn't too concerned. And again, this time I trusted God's timing. I went to sleep that night thinking baby's probably gonna come in the middle of the night. That's usually what happens when you're the most relaxed. Things start to happen. Sure enough, at like midnight, I started noticing that I was getting regular contractions. Things started picking up around 3 in the morning, enough for me to actually want to get out of bed. I got out of bed. I came out into the living room, and mind you, things are still super manageable at this point. And the whole time I was asking God, I was asking the Holy Spirit, what do you want me to do? Should I get out of bed right now? Should I keep laying down? What do you want me to do? And every time I heard a very subtle answer, go into the living room, be with me in the morning light. Just really peaceful nudges. So I came out into the living room, and I just labored quietly out here for a couple hours. Like I said, it was really, really manageable at this point. I wouldn't even really call it active labor at this point. My son actually he heard me walking around out here, so he came out and sat with me. He was like 3 years old at the time, and he was just still really tired, and he sat with me on the couch, and it was actually really sweet. Around about I think it was like 6:30 in the morning, things started getting a lot more intense, and it was at that point that I realized I could benefit from some help from my husband with like counter pressure and hip squeezes and that kind of thing. So I woke him up, he came out, and I'm still thinking I've got all day. So we're making plans with our friends that we kind of had standing by to come pick up the rest of our kids so that I could labor in peace. Baby was born before our friends even got here. My husband comes out, he starts helping me with hip squeezes. I started right around 7:30, I think. I started slipping back into old patterns of thought. I started having doubts. I started thinking maybe we're crazy for doing this unassisted. We didn't have a midwife, not a traditional midwife anyway. I I started wondering if we were making the right choices. What happens if, you know, XYZ unfurls? Which, I mean, I did my research and I had all of these plans, and I had emergency plans, and I had flow charts, and I had a whole binder put together. So we were good. We knew what to do if a real emergency was going to happen. But yeah, so around 7:30, I started having those thoughts. I didn't even realize I was actually in transition. Baby was born at like 8:45. I started getting the urge to push. I started getting the urge to push, and I didn't even realize what was happening. I thought, surely I can't be that far along. Because I've only been at this for a couple hours. And then baby was born. My husband caught, and as my friends were pulling up in the driveway to pick up our kids. I had a 3-hour labor, and sorry, my dog's really excited for some reason. I had a 3-hour labor. I had a 40-hour labor, a 48-hour labor, a 24-hour labor, and then I found Jesus and I had a 3-hour labor. Like, I'm sorry, like, that's just amazing, okay? And it all started with what I was believing up here. Do you believe the lies, or do you believe the truth? And the truth will set you free. So, whip your thought life into shape. Pay attention to those thoughts that are crossing through your brain. Take them captive and submit them to the truth of the Bible. Because believing for the Bible will set you free. And I'm not an expert. I'm still reading my Bible. I haven't gotten all the way through it. You don't need a doctorate in theology to start to believe these things and for these things to actually work for you. You can do it, and I'm with you. Follow for more.